Hey all, welcome to Challenge Accepted, the podcast where we challenge each other to watch a different show or movie every week. I am Frank, and I'm joined by Thomas.
Hello, everybody.
Today we're going to be talking about Dune Prophecy. We're going over that first episode, what we thought about it, what are our favorite parts, and where we think it might be going. What is your initial reaction to Dune Prophecy?
I really liked it. I think it has all the makings of a very deep, intriguing political story. I think there was a lot of elements that remind me of Game of Thrones, which is kind of perfect since we don't have House of Dragon right now.
Yeah.
But also, like, you're getting that Dune universe, right? We're back. We're talking about Arrakis. We're on Seleucus Secundus. We're, getting the Bene Gesserit. So, I don't know. I really enjoyed it, I think, a lot more than it seems like the internet did. What about you?
Well, I did need a midday nap, and it nailed that part.
Oh, jeez.
Not that it's not a beautiful world and characters I'm interested about, and I think a story that's cooking, but it's not a boil, it's a simmer, and so it's taken a while to really get your attention. There is definitely some key things that I'm excited for, like, of course, they're throwing out the names we all know. Apparently, 10,000 years, the names still stick. That's definitely not something that happens in our history.
Right. That is the one thing. Yeah, we'll talk about it later on the line where I'm like, things really haven't changed that much in 10,000 years, which is kind of weird.
Yeah. Even technology-wise, I know specifically, which is probably one of the bigger highlights of the series, is the fact that they're going to be looking at the evolution away from automation. But yeah, even the technology looks just the exact same. All of the architecture looks the same.
I know. Yeah. I mean, other than Seleucus Secundus that we see later on in the Dune movies that Denis Villeneuve did. I'm like, wait, why are the clothing the same? Why is the technology with the weapons the same? The spaceships pretty much look the same. It's just, that part of it's weird. And like nothing changed for these great houses really in 10,000 years. That's kind of funky too. But, maybe there's a reason why they're picking this time period specifically.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot to discuss on this, but before we get too far, let's go ahead and do our breakdown, and that is all you.
All right, and 3, 2, 1. This episode is called The Hidden Hand. We start off with a quote that has that Sardaukar voice. Victory is celebrated in light, but it's won in the darkness. And then we hear Valia Harkonnen saying, what holds more truth, history, or prophecy, which I think is going to be the main theme of this show. They show the Thinking Machine War, or I guess in the books it's called the Bolterian Jihad. I didn't read the books. And then we see that Valia Harkonnen shows up on the Bene Gesserit homeworld. From there, we meet the first superior mother, Raquella Berto Anarol. We hear how her setup is and what she's trying to do to kind of build up her order. From there, we see that she's also a hero in the war and that she was basically creating the first truthsayers. Now, she decides that she wants to or has to create her own leaders and starts doing a breeding program on Wallach 9. And then on her deathbed, years later, she has a vision of the temple being swallowed up, and there's a sandworm. She sees blue eyes in the star. I think that's going to be important. Now we see that young Valia basically wants to be on the throne. She then uses the voice to kill her other sister, Dorothea. It says 30 years later, then 116 years from the Great Machine War, then 10,148 years from the birth of Paul Atreides. That is weird to me. Then we start jumping around. We meet Lord Constantine, who is
30 seconds.
Part of the Carino family. We go and see a young Princess Inez getting married to a Prince Richize. She's getting trained by Akiran Atreides. They're bouncing around to all these different stories and plot lines. Then a character named Desmond Hart shows up at the castle, and he's a little weird and funky, but he's had 12 tours on Arrakis. There's like some sex scenes going on. The Emperor then sees Desmond on Arrakis. Really, what happens? And then Kayla says, "I see Mother as like the two kids, and then the last Bene Gesserit lady, Kasha, burn."
So, yeah, it's okay. I want to start off by saying that I absolutely know that George Lucas copied from Frank Herbert. I understand that, but I am so sick and tired of both Star Wars and Dune at this point. We get it. Tatooine and Arrakis are cool desert planets. I don't need to constantly be reminded of them in everything you guys do. And I thought for sure we wouldn't be going to Arrakis very much in this. And immediately it's like, hey, you know the coolest character in this whole show? He survived on Arrakis. Like, son of a bitch. Come on, guys. I know spice is incredibly important, but it just reminds me so much of the Tatooine things. Like, for real? We're going back to Tatooine again?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't mind it because the story doesn't take place there. It just reminds you like, hey, you know, I do actually appreciate the way they do it. And yet you're right. It is kind of annoying, but it's also like spice is what makes the world go round in this universe in a sense.
That's true. Yeah.
But they're like, yeah, I don't know. I didn't mind the way they reference it, but yeah, I guess to your point, yeah, it's like, do we really need to constantly be reminded of it?
Yeah, the fresh take that this world has that I think that makes it more distinct from the Dune world is again the references to automation, to the old AI, the robots, which that itself would be a fantastic series actually.
Yeah,
I like
the
that.
machine. Oh man, the Machine Wars is so cool because I think you read the first book and I read the first book of Dune, and it's like it's constantly referenced, right? This is why they have the technology that they have. There's no AI. There's no, even for them being able to navigate through space, they need spice because it unlocks this part of their brain, allows them to kind of be, for the X-Men fans out there, Sage, whose brain works like a supercomputer, allows the Mentats to do that, right? And I think that all is really cool in theory. But yeah, I don't know. I think I've kind of lost track with where I was going with that.
That is exactly the last 5 seconds of you speaking is exactly what this episode has been for me. Where it's just like, yeah, I mean, I know I should like this. I just, for some reason, am a little bit bored. And I think we have to let it kind of cook. This feels like it's one of those things we have to let it kind of build a couple episodes, build up that, because this was a whole lot of setting up the lore and introducing new characters and the situation that we're in. Even with the princess, which I'm like, hey, Princess Yanez, I think her name is, played by Sarah Sophie. Very interesting character. I cannot wait to see her trying to become a Bene Gesserit member. But right now we're just seeing her as like a party girl who's kind of just all set up. And let's get to it, guys. I got stuff to do.
Yeah. It's funny. Like I like the approach too, though, that this show is setting up, right? So you're right. We see the Machine Wars. I think this is where I was going. And I love that we're getting to see that actual battle because that's what really kicks off this entire world. And it's such an interesting take. Like imagine, I mean, maybe we're not far off from it, especially with Tesla robots and all there. But like if AI did take over, and we had to fight a war against them, of course, you got your Terminators, all that. What would that look like? But not only that, like where do we go as humanity from there? I think that's such a cool premise. But we get to see with Valia being a Harkonnen and saying like my family in history will always be looked down upon because my grandfather wanted to run away from the situation and not be used as a human shield. And this Atreides comes in there and all of a sudden everybody loves them because they're this, they stepped up or they got lucky in this battle. And I love that the premise of the Bene Gesserit, because we also see how they betray them in the Denis movies in a sense, is really set up through a Harkonnen. So I love how it kind of connects there. Again, the only issue I'm running into this, and I really, really did like this first episode, is that, again, nothing seems to have changed in over 10,000 years. Like these families still hate each other. They're still in power as well as the technology and the clothes and all that.
You are 100% right. And that's a impression that we're getting from the internet as well, is that people are like, why did you set this 10,000 years in the past? We know that the book isn't set 10,000 years in the past. Why did you do this so far back? And then use all the same names. And so I think it's important that we point out when there's a difference and a similarity. So very much so, it's the same names. The Harkonnen is going to end up being a bad guy. Oh, this one Atreides kid happens to be like this stellar swordsman who's clearly being set up to be the good guy. It's like, okay, we get it.
And he's like good looking and he's like everything you would think an Atreides is. Yeah.
You're like, oh, you're definitely Leto's line. But some of the differences, I think, like we were talking about with the machines, I think we're going to see in this series the progression towards using humans to replace machines. Like, I don't think they have mentats yet. I'm not positive on that, but maybe we'll see like, hey, you're going to be trained to think like a computer and you're going to take so much spice that you actually see how to steer a ship in the stars, that it'll kind of give you some prophecies a little bit. And then like we're seeing with these guys, probably early on example of this, the ability to not only see the truth, but also manipulate others once that's amplified a little bit farther. And so hopefully this show is setting up what we have in Dune, because maybe that takes 10,000 years to develop.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Again, it's just weird. I put out a thread basically saying, like just what happens in our real life, like every decade, every 10 years, like clothes change,
Yeah,
technology changes. How in 10,000 years did nothing change, especially in this
yeah.
like really advanced civilization and stuff? So that is kind of weird, but I do appreciate what you're saying too about like seeing how mentats became mentats and all that. It is weird too. We see in one of the scenes that Prince Richize after the big wedding ceremony, and he's kind of a little Joffrey a little bit to me. He's kind of a little dick. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying he deserved to be burned up, but like I really didn't like that kid. And then but he has that AI kind of lizard. They called it a toy, but I mean, they're so close to where the wars were. It seems like people are
Yeah.
more strict about AI and everything 10,000 years later than they are just coming out of the war, which wouldn't happen. Like they
Exactly.
kind of excuse the dad at the party. But I don't know. That part was kind of weird to me too. But yeah, I think it's just kind of, I don't know. They're really just setting up the political intrigue and how this world works, I guess.
Yeah, they really are. It's really hard for us to judge this episode in whole because it really was incomplete. Jonathan brought up a good point. He's like, this is one of those shows they should have put out a couple episodes first. And
Yeah.
then we would have had all this setup and then answering some of those questions. Like I think what they're really hoping is that you took what Desmond did as kind of like the big punch for the end of this episode. And it's like, no, that's like a mid-episode thing that would happen. And then from there, you're watching Desmond with a little bit more caution. Like we already are, because he's Travis Fimmel is such a cool actor. He's Ragnar Lothbrok for me forever. But let's get that midway so we go see what he's trying to do. He's trying to be the Littlefinger. We know he's unsuccessful because right now he's trying to take down the Bene Gesserit, and they're very much in charge in Dune. So whatever he does doesn't work. I wish they just kind of played with that more.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. You're right. Yeah, Bene Gesserit will continue on, but I mean, it still is cool to see how they're threatened. It feels, at least for me in Dune, from the first book and from the movies, like they're almost unstoppable. And this is the first time I feel like they're actually at being threatened from their power. So I
Yeah.
do kind of like that aspect too, where it wasn't all smooth sailing for the Bene Gesserit. Like we're gonna do these breeding things, and like no one can stop us, and no one knows we're doing it. But even at their fundamental core, when we see young Valia and Dorothea, like they don't agree. And I do kind of like that there's this internal struggle there. And yeah, I think it's kind of a cool setup from there. But also like, what is up with this guy? It seems like he has other powers, right? And I also like seeing the introduction of the voice, where it's like, whoa, Dorothea's like, what are you doing to me? Like, I don't know how you're doing it, but it was cool. Like,
Yeah.
I could teach you this. But again, it came from a Harkonnen. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think we're going to see the Harkonnens slip more and more into villainy, and then like they'll look a lot more like they do. So this is set in that world, that version of the Dune movies, but in the books they don't look like that, where they're bald and so grotesque. They do look bad, but not like some of them are very handsome. Matter of fact,
Oh, the Harkonnen?
The Harkonnen, yeah, they don't look bald and purposely like monsters in the books necessarily.
No, they don't. In fact,
yeah.
Fade is like, who's played by Austin Butler in the movie.
Right.
Fade is described as being super handsome and
Yeah.
really ripped. And I mean, I think he still kind of is in a weird way. I'm sure there's people still think he's hot, but yeah, it's a different take, right? I think Sting played him in the 1984 version.
And that I think is the more accurate version because they made sure to show him like always posing as a superhero type of thing like that. So I think that was the more
Yeah.
accurate version of it.
Totally shirtless and he's all like oiled up and stuff.
Yeah. So I don't want people to assume because yes, this is in the same world as the books, or as the movie. So maybe we're going to see the Harkonnens go from look like normal people into these more monstrous looking people over the course of the show, or that'll take 10,000 years. But that's one of the
Yeah.
changes that we have to look forward to from the movies.
Absolutely. And also like at this point they're in a different world, right? And also like the internal
That's true.
struggle of the Harkonnen, right? I think the Atreides will always come out as like they were steadfast, they were on the right side of history, they did the right things. And it kind of dooms them in some ways. Dooms them. But like, they're always going to be kind of the good guys. Where we even see that there's internal struggle with the Harkonnen. We got in the movies too between Fade and the uncle or the Baron Harkonnen. But like in this one, we also see that they weren't always on top and they had to kind of weasel their way in. When we see at the party with the early version of the Baron talking about the whale fur. So that's cool because that's also a hint that this is before they get to forgetting what the planet's called in the movie, where it's all white and black.
Yeah, it's like 2 words and very long, and people are screaming at their phones right now because they know.
Yeah, exactly. but in this series, they're on a different planet, and through those 10,000 years, they move from that planet into the one that we see in the Denis movies in part 2 of Dune.
And they were given Arrakis at one point too. Like the beginning of the Dune storyline is actually them being kicked out off of Arrakis. So. They have had other places. I think so. Here's my prediction for how this series is going to cook. I keep saying cook. I realize that now. It's time for
Someone's
breakfast.
getting hungry.
Yeah. So Desmond, it's that intermittent fasting is not great. Desmond Hart, I think, is going to be revealed to be a Fremen spy in a way. So I think he gets radicalized. I'll use that word for the lack of a better one. Radicalized by the Fremen, like we see Paul does. And instead of Paul then taking the reins from the Fremen, he is subdued by the Fremen and then is sent to try to take out what they see as a rising threat because presumably they also have prophecies of the future and might see that it's all about the Bene Gesserit ruining us. So then they would take somebody who can penetrate the Bene Gesserit by getting into the court of the emperor and changing their plan. So maybe he is coming at it from the Fremen side, which would bring the Fremen into the main stage here as well, which is such a vital part of the Dune stories. Because right now this is all the other houses, but it doesn't talk about the native people of Arrakis. And I think if you're going to bring up Arrakis at all and have a Dune story, you're probably going to bring the Fremen in at some point too.
That's a good one. I like that theory a lot. The interesting thing with that though is you're right. I mean, if that is true, it does kind of like ruin the show in a sense because we know that they lose and we know that the Bene Gesserit eventually come in and are able to kind of bring their philosophy or their religion in a sense over to the Fremen people and then they adopt it, right? So by the time that Paul gets there, everyone's like Muad'Dib, Muad'Dib. They're looking for the signs of that Messiah. Yeah. So if that is true, it kind of is like, well, duh, but I hope that it's
how Dune is that though, to be like,
Dune,
hey, this is the control that's coming, avoid it, and they're like, let's get that control all over us. That's so Dune.
That is true. I'm curious to see. I agree with you, there has to be some kind of double agent aspect to him because otherwise it would be too on the nose. And he's also saying some pretty interesting things of talking about control and even without the robots trying to control us, like someone else is trying to control us, he has that conversation with the Emperor Carino, outside on, kind of at night in the fire pit, on the edge of that cliff. And I don't know. I kind of like that I don't know about really who he is, but I can kind of see, I can see what you're saying. I feel like
going back to that, the Fremen are all about freedom. Think about how Chadwick Boseman, oh my God. Way off.
Well, we are talking about Black Panther later on this week, though.
That's what it is. Zendaya. Think about how Zendaya is always telling Paul about like, you got to be. That's how far off I was. Zendaya to Chadwick Boseman, by the way. It's not that early in the day. But she's always telling Paul about how there's freedom and yada, yada, yada. That's exactly what's coming out of Desmond's mouth right now, is he's telling him about like, you guys were controlled by robots. Now you're being controlled by the Bene Gesserit and you're just taking it. If you're talking about the Fremen who might possibly see the future because they too drink the water of life, and seeing that there's a coming religion that's going to change us forever and put us into a war, they might be saying like, we have to avoid this and seek freedom and change our fate. And it might all be for nothing. Again, that's just a prediction, but I think personally it would kind of save this story so far for me.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I think it's, for me, the big drama is how does the Bene Gesserit handle this big conflict, and how do they kind of get back to where they were, before the start of Denis movies, or I guess the start of like the original Dune. And I think there's something there. I really dig it. I also really like the fact that not everybody agrees in the Bene Gesserits too. It seems like they're so powerful and they're so unified in that first movie. But to kind of see that even their own it's really like Valia's determination. Like she's like, no one's gonna stop me. This is what Mother Raquella said that we needed to do. I like, I don't know, something about that. I like that she just kind of has to fight, but it's not like a normal fight. It's not just like hand to hand combat war. It's like mental manipulation.
Yeah.
And that even as they plant all these different Bene Gesserit women, which I don't even think at this time they're called Bene Gesserit, they're still all aligned. Whether they're with House Rachise, whether they're with House Ricino or Carino or Atreides or whatever, the Bene Gesserit are really trying to like manipulate things and work together, even when they don't agree. Something about that, it just seems fun to me.
I think right now they're still just referred to as truth sayers, which is kind of their role in the court. But I think that might be what they're considered. I don't. Yeah, I think what we're seeing is that what she wants, what Valia wants, is what becomes the truth for them, because when the events of Dune kick in, it's Lady Jessica that turns away from the Bene Gesserit and forms her own kind of version of the religion, using what she learned from the Bene Gesserit to then manipulate, because they send out those spies early on and convince the Fremen that Paul is going to be God, and then she uses that against the Bene Gesserit to turn them against her and their plans to keep the Emperor in power. Because remember, the way the Bene Gesserit are at the end of the first Dune book is, hey, we could go with either Paul or Fade, and they want to go with Fade because he's more controllable. But Paul isn't, and Lady Jessica is the reason that's happening. She's kind of Valia at her time.
Yeah, yeah. She changes it. She like kind of just goes into what she wants. That's so true. I think it's interesting. There's a lot of hints to Paul coming as well, whether it's like the eyes and the stars and all the visions. Obviously like the temple getting swallowed up on Arrakis, I think perfectly is an example of what you just said, of them turning away, because literally on Arrakis is where the religion gets destroyed in a sense, right? Yep. That's where Paul decides, okay, I'm going to just take it and do whatever I want. But yeah, you're right. Because of Lady Jessica, now all of a sudden it's like, well, we're going to do our own thing, and then we're going to conquer you and the rest of the universe based on what we want to do. So yeah.
And learning from them. So it's still all the tricks. But do you have any other prophecies on this than that, or any other predictions? I keep saying prophecy as if like we're going to be able to see into the spices.
Yeah, like,
no, at least 6 episodes are going to go.
We don't have any prophecy, but we have theories. I don't. I think that is it. It's just trying to add to the Dune lore. I really dug it. Again, I can see what you're saying. I see what a lot of people are saying about it being slow, but I don't know. I kind of did want to know more about the Bene Gesserit, and I did want to know about how they develop their powers and their skills. I find it interesting that they're kind of put through like a boot camp where it's like you have to overcome your body, you have to overcome your mind. There's like elements of like equilibrium in there too, where they have to like control the way they feel, their pain, and then they're really attuned to like the way other people think. Like, what's all the signs of lying, and why is lying hard, and why is this a skill that we can tap into? So it's like part science and also kind of magic in a way. Like, it's cool.
Jedis. They're Jedis. It's so full on Jedi Temple, but I know that Herbert came with it first.
Right. I mean, before the Acolyte, Jedis were like the ultimate good in the universe, and so they weren't evil. Like I always felt like Bene Gesserit were a little bit more manipulative and evil. But again, the Acolyte has since said like, no, the Jedi weren't always good or whatever, but which I don't really appreciate still. But I could see a lot of influence. It obviously definitely influences what Star Wars has done, but I like that there's so much they can do with it. Again, you have to, I feel like, always tie it back to Arrakis or Tatooine. But I like seeing some of these other worlds. Like this is cool, and the settings have been awesome. Like I think the set design and everything is very much like Denis. I think the CGI looks good, and the costuming looks awesome. I'm just like, the thing with the costuming is like, why is it exactly the same some 10,000 years later? That wouldn't happen.
And the casting is very tight as well. I think they've got some really good actors. There's something about Mark Strong that I'm just like, yeah, I'll follow you, man. I'm good. We just saw him as Falcone, and I'm like, sure, let's join that mob.
Right, I'm okay. Okay, thank you. I was like, this is the second month in a row he's been a father of like a wayward teen. She's trying to figure out her place in the universe and blah, blah, blah. It's like... Yeah. I'm like, okay, I guess Mark Strong is just that dude. But it's so funny. But he's always amazing, so I have no complaints there.
I believe he's the. I think it's him. It could be somebody else, but I'm pretty sure he's the one that's in Veep as the fitness boyfriend. If you guys want to see Mark Strong just being silly, that's the place to go watch him. Where he keeps like, yeah, it's just a blast. So, by the way, speaking of Veep, I want to touch on this real quick. We'll cover it at some point. We have our notes. We're not in the mood right now to talk about Veep, but we'll at some point. We'll just leave it at that.
Those episodes were hitting too close to real life right now.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, maybe we should stay away from it. We're not a political show, and I don't want to get sad. So that's kind of
and not to get into the politics, but that's exactly it. We don't want to get sad. Oh shit. But yeah, let's throw a grade on this, and unless you have anything else you want to throw out there about the state of Dune, Dune prophecy.
Yeah, I still don't really understand what the prophecy is, per se, in terms of Valia, like what she sees. I'm curious about that, so that did kind of hook me. But then the reason why that stems is because Kasha burns up, and also the young Prince Richize. We kind of were talking about it before we started recording on like what we think it is. I think we both are on the side that it's not a power from Desmond. What do you think it is?
I think it is a power. I think it's a power that he got from Spice, and I'm going to lean on the Fremen thing. I think it's a Fremen ability that he got. But I have seen online that people are believing it's not a power because it's definitely not from the books or anything.
Right. And so, yeah, from whatever I've read, which is in the books, there's no reference to that in the books. I think it's somehow he was able to poison both of them. And some people might be saying, oh, why did they both burn up at the same time? I do not think that it has to have been at the same time. If you watch that scene, and I've watched it a couple times now, the way it's edited makes you think it's happening at the same time, but it may not be exactly at the same time. I think he's just been able to meet the prince. That happens, and then he was able to kind of somehow poison or add something in, or like, yeah, I guess poison's the best word for Kasha too. And then when she goes to Wallach 9, she then burns up, some days later. But also the same could be said about young Prince Richize.
Yeah. So I definitely think that if that's the case, if it is some sort of poison or whatever, that makes him like a Littlefinger level bad guy. And
Yeah.
what else does he have planned? If he had gotten that in place, what else did he have ready to go? That's cool.
I mean, it makes a total sense. The emperor says on that scene where they're sitting out again at the fireplace, he says, man, I had a bad feeling about this wedding. He's like, if this doesn't go through or something happens, some divine purpose happens, like the gods really will be on our side. And he doesn't believe in gods. So I know this is Desmond's way of saying like, oh, look what the gods have provided. You should trust in what I'm saying. It allows him to kind of get closer to the emperor. And if he's closer to the emperor and he's able to kind of take back power of Arrakis, then you're right. It does give more freedom to the Fremen on Arrakis.
If it's not a power, why was he getting like a headache during it?
I think it's a red herring. I don't think that he actually was mind melting something or whatever. I think
not.
it's.
That's so silly.
What's that?
I hope not. It just looks so silly when the way he was like, oh boy. It just looks silly the way he was doing it. Yeah.
But I also like, who knows what the Fremen did to him? Maybe they did poison him with something. Maybe they gave him a different altered version of the water of life. Maybe they used spice to kind of manipulate him in some different way. Like maybe he's not fully encased in the Fremen world or religion because his eyes are blue. I know this is real eyes in real life, but maybe it's the pre-version before he fully becomes like a real Fremen. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways they can kind of spin that, and we don't really know the full extent of what spice can do out there in the universe as far as like people like us who haven't read every story, just kind of what we've seen in Dune. It hits and affects people, it seems, in some similar ways and in other people very different ways. So I don't know. We'll see.
And if you got swallowed by the sandworm, the water of life that they drink to kind of become like the next level is, I believe it's sandworm bile or mucus or something like that. So it's from the sandworms themselves. So maybe he also got like a concentrated dose of that too, which could have been like, whoa, I could see everything now. And that might have been a little bit of a jarring moment.
Right, like he's getting it from the source. He wasn't getting like a manipulated thing. And then, even when they do it for Paul in part 2, they cut open that young sandworm and then they mix it with something. And then that's what turns it into the water of life, right? So maybe he got a concentrated dose. They're going to really have to explain to me how he knowed his way out of the sandworm. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm all for it, and I don't know. I maybe he even manipulated what was on the recording device. Some part of me thinks that like what we saw wasn't the exact thing that happened.
Well, yeah, because in the thing, he put down two thumpers. So he's calling the sandworm that he just said, like, killed by people and stuff. So then it's like, did you call it? Or were those left by Fremen that attacked you? Or not even Fremen. That's the other red herring going on, is he's saying it wasn't Fremen, it was some of your men that attacked us. There are many questions. And unfortunately, right now, because it's all set up, we only have questions. We don't have a lot of answers.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. But I like kind of the way it's painting the world already. And I think there's going to be a lot of answers if they do only get a season one, which I'm sure, you kind of have to write the best season you can. It still has to lay an amazing groundwork for whatever Denis doing. So, yeah, I like it. I just kind of like being back in this world and seeing different planets. That's fun.
I 100% agree with you. Beautiful world, beautiful costuming. I am happy to be back in this world too. You're right.
Yeah.
So we have 6 episodes of the show, and we're going to see how things go with both this episode, as in the Challenge Accepted episode, and the next episode of Dune Prophecy, and see if it's something that we're going to continue doing every week. But we would love to still hear from you. And so hit us up on Threads and let us know what you thought of this first episode of Dune, and are you excited to see the rest of things coming up? Do you want to give a grade or a score on this first episode? What do you think?
Yeah, I think 3.5. Like I really liked it.
I'm going pretty low, but I'm going like 2. I think 2 is probably fair for me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of room to improve is the way to look at that.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions to answer, and I think we'll get hopefully all of them by the end of the season, or most of them.
Yeah. Our next episode, luckily, we're going to be with a guest. It's going to be Megan from Vigilante Vibes. Check out their podcast. And we're going to be talking about Wakanda Forever. So we're going back to Marvel, folks. We're going to talk about Wakanda Forever. Immediately, I'll let you know, not my favorite Marvel movie. I thought it felt pretty flat. And I think, to me, it felt like they were just trying to give Chadwick Boseman a send-off, which I think they did good with that. But as for an actual movie, meh. And I think you have a more positive opinion on it.
Yeah, I love this movie. Maybe fundamentally it's not the best movie ever. Some things kind of fall off and stuff, but like the acting is still top notch. I love kind of that last fight scene and the send off they give to Chadwick Boseman. I've never watched this movie and not cried a couple times. And I think if anything can move you like that, it's an awesome movie. So for me, I love this movie on so many levels.
So make sure you guys check out Vigilante Vibes. That's, again, hosted by Megan on all your favorite podcast platforms, and follow them on social media too. She does a really good job over there. We also are going to be ending things off this year with the Geek Freaks Pet Pantry. It's the fundraiser that we're going to be doing this year. We did the food bank last year, and it's your chance to raise money for the Elk Grove Animal Shelter. You want to tell them a little bit about it?
Sure, as I pull up your post, because I didn't even know where it was. Yes, so let's see. Our goal is to raise funds and to help the friends of the Elk Grove Animal Shelter provide food care and a little extra love for every dog and cat waiting for their forever home. I believe it's a no-kill shelter as well, which is amazing. I know we're both big dog people, so I'm super happy to have this. We'll have links to the GoFundMe in our description and on social media, so definitely check it out. And I think, are we going to be doing some contributions ourselves for a certain amount of downloads and listens?
Let's do that. I like that idea. So I know for the Geek Freaks side of things, we're just donating money to it right away. We're also partnering with Beauty's Biscuits, which is a local business that does dog food treats. And if you use code Geek Freaks, I'll put the link in that as well. If you use code Geek Freaks, you get 20% off. And we're going to be donating some treats from Beauty's Biscuits as well, directly in hand to the shelter as well. But yeah, how about, let's see. How many listens do you think we should get for how much we should donate? I'll put it in your hands.
That is something we're gonna have to figure out offline. I have no idea off the top of my head, but we'll figure it out, and then we'll let people know out there. But either way, it's all going to a good cause, and we want to give back this Thanksgiving. So please come join us with that, and support your furry friends.
And thank you everybody who's donated so far. It's been really cool seeing people talk about and what we're going to be doing. We're doing a network wide is sharing stories of our animals. For example, Jonathan just spoke about Elsa, a dog that he found on the streets and took in, and she's now 10 years old. He's been raising her for 10 years. He found her at 6 months old and brought her in. And yeah, she's been with the family the whole time, so it's been really cool. But we'll be sharing stories of all of our dogs over the next 2 months, and send in your stories about your dogs, cats, and others. We'd love to hear about those as well.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. We'll see you guys at the end of this week when we talk about Wakanda Forever. All right, bye.
Aloha. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, sorry, dude. I was like.